All right, let's dive in. Today we're going to be exploring Swami Vivekananda's commentary on Patanjali's Yoga Sutras,
Oh, cool.
specifically Chapter 3, the one that gets into all those crazy yogic powers.
Sounds intense.
It is. We've got an audiobook of Vivekananda's complete works, and it is, well, it's pretty wild.
I bet. I mean, Vivekananda, he always makes those ancient teachings feel, like, so relevant, you know?
Yeah, he does. And let's be real, the idea of like knowing the future or understanding what animals are saying, that's the really juicy stuff, right?
Oh, for sure. It's like total superhero stuff.
Right, like straight out of a movie. But he's also careful to say, don't get too hung up on those powers.
Yeah, he makes it clear they're like stepping stones, not the end goal.
Exactly. So before we get lost in like teleporting fantasies, let's back up a bit.
Okay.
Where do these powers even come from?
Well, Vivekananda says the key is this practice called samyama. It's a combo of dharana, dhyana, and samadhi.
Right, I'm guessing most of our listeners are familiar with those, but just in case, can you break those down?
Sure. Imagine you're working on a puzzle, right? Dharana is that initial focus, zeroing in on the pieces.
Okay.
Then dharana, that's when you get so absorbed you lose track of everything else.
Like you're in the zone.
Exactly. And samadhi, that's when the puzzle and your mind kind of merge, like a total breakthrough.
Whoa, so it's not about emptying your mind, it's about like ultimate focus.
Yeah, and when you apply that samyama to something specific, that's when the powers can show up.
Okay, that's when it gets really interesting. The book is full of examples, like knowing when you'll die, understanding animal languages, even becoming invisible.
Yeah, wild stuff, right? But he's clear that even those powers are considered external, like small potatoes compared to the ultimate goal,
Which is?
seatless samadhi.
Okay, so let's talk about that ultimate goal. If those powers are just steps, what's the final destination on this path? What does liberation or kevala actually mean?
Well, Vivekananda describes it as total liberation from the cycle of birth and death, from suffering, from all the limitations of this material world.
Okay, that sounds pretty profound.
It is. He's saying it's about realizing that our true self, the purusha, is separate from Prakriti, which is like all the changing stuff.
Okay, I'm already feeling like I need a whiteboard for all these concepts. But hold on. If liberation is the goal, why bother with these powers at all? Wouldn't they just distract you?
That's a great question, and it gets to why Vivekananda is always talking about discernment, seeing clearly. He says these powers can be tempting, but if you cling to them, they become obstacles.
So like being offered cake when you're on a diet, right? Delicious, but not going to help you reach your goals.
Exactly. He even talks about, like, celestial beings who tempt yogis with worldly stuff, trying to keep them stuck here.
Whoa, so it's like a cosmic willpower test.
Pretty much. So how do you pass that test?
Yeah, how do you not get sidetracked?
Discrimination. That ability to see through illusions, to tell what's real from what's just fleeting.
So instead of being blinded by the shiny powers, a true yogi learns to see the deeper reality.
Exactly. That ability is key for navigating the spiritual path and reaching liberation.
Wow, okay. Now, before we go too deep into the philosophy of it all, I gotta admit, I'm still curious about those powers.
Of course. It's all fascinating stuff.
Yeah. Let's dive into some examples, see how he explains how they develop and what the potential pitfalls are.
Sounds good. Where do you want to start? Something mind-boggling, like knowing the past and future.
Oh, perfect. I've always been fascinated by that, like accessing past lives or getting glimpses of what's to come. Is that even possible?
According to Vivekananda, it is. He says every thought, every experience, it all leaves a subtle impression on our minds.
Okay.
And those impressions, they don't disappear, they just become dormant, like seeds waiting to sprout.
So it's like our minds have this hidden archive of our past, just waiting to be unlocked.
Exactly. And through samyama, a yogi can tap into that archive and re-experience those past events super vividly. And he says they can also receive the impressions that are about to unfold, getting insights into the future.
Incredible. But how does samyama let them do that, tap into this time archive?
He says the yogi focuses on the subtle changes happening within their own mind, the chitta. These changes, he says, are threefold. Changes in form, time, and state.
Okay, that sounds kind of abstract.
I know, right? Think of it like a piece of clay. You can mold it into a pot, then a sculpture, then back into a disc.
Okay, a change in form.
Right. Now imagine that clay existing yesterday, today, and tomorrow.
Change in time.
And lastly, that clay can be smooth, rough, wet, dry, change in state. By focusing on these subtle changes within the chitta, the yogi can master the flow of time and access past and future experiences.
So instead of time being this fixed thing, it becomes like a fluid landscape they can navigate.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. It's about moving beyond our normal perception of time as this thing that controls us, and instead experiencing it as something we can explore, maybe even influence.
That's mind-blowing. Makes you wonder what other possibilities open up when we master our minds like that.
For sure. And we're just getting started. It talks about a whole bunch of other yogic powers, each one crazier than the last.
Okay, well, I'm all ears. What other incredible abilities did Vivekananda talk about? Let's pick another one and see what other secrets we can uncover.
Welcome back, ready to explore some more of these yogic powers.
Absolutely. I'm still thinking about that whole time traveling thing. So cool.
Yeah, it is wild, right? But how about this one, understanding animal languages? Have you ever wondered what your pets are thinking?
Oh, all the time. I mean, I feel such a connection with animals, so the idea of really communicating with them is like mind-blowing. But how does Vivekananda explain that? Is it like deciphering their sounds?
It's deeper than that. He says our normal experience is this blend of three things: the external vibration, our internal sensation, and then how our mind interprets it.
Okay.
So like when a bird sings, there's the sound wave, your eardrum vibrating, and then your mind recognizing it as bird song.
Right. It's not just passively hearing, it's actively processing it.
Exactly, and what Vivekananda suggests is that a yogi can, through samyama, separate those three things, and that lets them experience the pure essence of the vibration, the actual meaning behind any sound.
So they could hear like a dog bark, but understand the actual thought or feeling behind it. That's amazing. What kind of stuff do you think you could learn from that?
Imagine, you could understand animal behavior, their social structures, their needs. It would totally change how we relate to nature.
Wow, it'd be like unlocking a whole new dimension of communication, bridging the gap between species. Honestly, I'm a little jealous of those yogis.
Haha, I get it, it's super cool. But even that power is just part of the whole path, you know?
Right, we don't want to lose sight of the big picture. Speaking of which, didn't you mention some pretty incredible physical powers too? Like defying gravity and stuff?
He did. He describes yogis becoming so light that they walk on water, even float through the air.
Whoa, real-life levitation. How is that even possible? Are they messing with the laws of physics or something?
He says it comes from mastering akasha, which is often translated as like ether or space. It's considered the most subtle of the five elements in yogic philosophy.
Okay, so it's not about breaking physics, but working with them on a deeper level through this akasha.
Exactly. By focusing their samyama on the akasha within their own body, they become so light that they overcome gravity.
It's like tapping into a hidden force that lets them go beyond their physical limits. It's so fascinating and kind of freaky at the same time.
It really challenges how we think about what's possible. That's what's so intriguing about these teachings. They make us question our assumptions about reality, you know?
Absolutely. And it's not just physical stuff, right? Didn't Vivekananda also talk about mental resilience, like super strength?
Oh yeah, he describes yogis enduring crazy conditions, resisting disease, even controlling their bodily functions.
That sounds like another level of self-mastery. How do they do that? Is it pure mental discipline?
He explains it comes from two sources. First, through samyama, they can draw on the strength of other beings, like imagine an elephant.
Wait, seriously, borrow strength from an elephant? How?
Sounds wild, right? But the idea is that everything's connected at some deep level, so by concentrating on the elephant's strength, they can tap into that and channel it into their own body.
Like a mental download of super strength? That's incredible. You said there was another way too.
Yet the other way is by mastering the elements within their own body. By purifying those elements through yogic practices, their physical form becomes super strong, resistant to harm. He even mentions yogis walking on fire.
Okay, that's just superhuman. It's like they've unlocked hidden potential within themselves, pushing the limits of what's humanly possible.
And again, these abilities aren't the goal. They're more like side effects on the journey to liberation.
Right, it's not about being a superhero. It's about transcending the ego and like realizing your true nature. But man, those powers are hard to resist, you know?
I know, they're fascinating. It's natural to be drawn to them, but Vivekananda is always reminding us that the real test is not what powers you have, but how you use them, and if you can stay focused on the true goal.
So how do they resist the temptation to get sidetracked? How do they actually stay on the path to freedom?
Discrimination, always discrimination. He talks about these celestial beings who tempt yogis with even more powers and pleasures, hoping to keep them bound to the material world.
So it's a constant battle between temptation and like higher purpose.
Exactly. The yogi has to be super aware, recognizing those temptations as distractions.
Sounds like a pretty epic journey. So many possibilities, but also so many pitfalls.
It is. And remember, this is just a glimpse into Vivekananda's take on the Yoga Sutras. There's so much more to unpack.
Well, I think we need a moment to process all this. Time travel, talking to animals, defying gravity. It's amazing to think about what might be possible.
It really is. And we're just getting started on the depths of Vivekananda's commentary.
Let's take a quick break and then dive back in to explore even more about those powers and that ultimate goal of liberation. Welcome back. We've been on quite a journey, exploring those yogic powers that Vivekananda talks about.
It has been a wild ride.
Right. From bending time to talking to animals, It's clear there's so much more to our minds than we realize.
Definitely, but with all these amazing powers, it's easy to forget the ultimate goal, liberation, what Vivekananda calls kevala.
You're right. We've talked about the powers, the temptations, and that importance of discrimination. But what does liberation actually feel like? What's it like to reach that state of kevala?
Well, Vivekananda describes it as like this complete isolation, but also perfection. It's about realizing our true self, the purusha, is separate from, well, from Prakriti, all the stuff that's constantly changing.
Okay, I'm trying to picture this. Could you maybe explain the difference between purusha and prakriti a bit more? I think it's so easy to get caught up in, identifying with our thoughts and feelings and all that.
Yeah, for sure. Think of it this way. Purusha is pure consciousness, like the silent observer. It's the part of you that doesn't change, even as your thoughts and experiences come and go. Prakriti, though, that's all the dynamic energy that makes up the material world, your body, your mind, everything that's constantly in flux.
So liberation is about recognizing we're not our thoughts, we're not our experiences, but something deeper that's not limited by the material world.
Exactly. It's like understanding the difference between the seer and the seen, the experiencer and the experience. When we cling to the idea that we are those thoughts and feelings, that's when we get stuck in that cycle of suffering.
That makes sense, but how do we actually make that shift? Is it just about understanding the concept, or is there more to it?
Vivekananda is clear that liberation isn't just about like book smarts or even mastering those powers. It's about purifying the mind, removing those seeds of evil that kind of cloud our perception and keep us bound to suffering.
Seeds of evil, huh? What are those exactly, like negative thoughts?
Think of them as all the negative stuff we accumulate over time. Greed, hatred, jealousy, delusion, anything that hides our true nature.
So it's like polishing the mirror of our minds so we can reflect our true nature more clearly.
That's a great way to put it. On the mind is totally pure, it reflects the purusha perfectly. Like seeing the world through a crystal clear lens, without all the filters of our conditioned mind.
That sounds amazing. Does this just like happen overnight though?
It's a process, a gradual refinement. Vivekananda says the path to liberation is a journey, not a destination. Each step we take towards purifying our minds and being more discerning, it brings us closer to that freedom.
So it's not about reaching a specific point, but about the constant process of transforming ourselves.
Exactly. And remember, even though the end goal is liberation, the journey itself is packed with amazing insights and experiences. And yeah, those yogic powers can play a part.
It's like they're signposts showing we're on the right path, encouraging us to keep going.
I like that. They can be powerful motivators, but only if we use them wisely and don't get attached, remembering they're not the final destination.
Yeah, got to keep our eyes on the prize, that state of pure awareness, freedom from suffering, like Vivekananda describes.
And what's amazing is this path is open to everyone. We all have that potential to cultivate these qualities and experience that liberation.
This deep dive has been incredible. We've covered so much, the powers of the mind, the challenges, and that ultimate goal of liberation. Lots to think about.
Definitely. And we've only scratched the surface of Vivekananda's commentary. There's so much wisdom to explore.
Well, I think we've given our listeners plenty to chew on. Any final thoughts you'd like to share?
I've just encouraged everyone to, keep exploring these teachings, discover that transformative power of yoga for yourself. It's not just about poses or practices. It's a whole philosophy, a path to self-discovery and liberation.
That's a very great way to put it. Well, on that note, we'll wrap up our deep dive for today. Thanks for joining us on this incredible journey.
It was my pleasure. Keep exploring, keep asking those questions, and keep diving deep.